How's it going? How's it going? Better put the fucking mic on. So we're going to do things a bit differently again. We're going to have one of these, a weird episode. I'm going to start doing these a little bit less often, maybe. Maybe just a couple a week. And we'll see how it goes. I don't fucking know. Again, I'm doing this for myself. Because it helps. Yeah, we're going to do things a bit differently today. This is a weird one. Just back from the gym. And yeah, I'm still in a bit of a slump. Still thinking about fucking the Italian. Um, yeah, it will get easier. And I'm really looking forward to next week. I don't know. I've got those bugging doubts in my brain that I'm gonna hear something I don't want to hear, but we have to be adults. And ultimately, as much as I love her, I do want her to be happy. But here we go. Different. We're gonna do it differently. So some of you will know this about me. Most of you won't know this about me. And I'm going to tell you something about my childhood and my upbringing. And again, I need to make this very clear. At no point am I using this as an excuse for my failures, for my behaviors. I'm certainly not using it as a reason why Gaia left me. But it comes up in therapy. The therapist, the 2, 3 I've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, all pinpoint this as a reason. I think it's a bit more complicated than that. But while they're talking about it, I think it's only fair now you know about it. This is a thing between the ages of, up until about the age of 30, I never really spoke about. I told Gaia very early on in the relationship, I said, look, if you're going to get into this with me, you're going to need to know a bit about the past. There will be one person watching who knows about this, and it might hurt them. I don't mean that hurt, and I apologise. There'll be a member of my family who will be watching, and a particular member of my family who will find this quite hard to watch. And probably they might not want to watch this one. So, at the age of 8 years old, well, my dad was really old-fashioned. Public school boy. You know, my granddad was mayor of Macclesfield, Conservative councillor, and they had it in their head that, you know, it was always about the firstborn, the first son. And I was the first grandson. There was many before me, but I was the first grandson. And so my dad, along with, and we weren't a well-off family, by the way, but with help from my granddad, they sent me at the age of 8 years old off to boarding school, away from a family home, away from my friends, away from my brother, away from my parents. From the age of 8, I would come home. It was every 3 months. I would come home. I must say, my experience at boarding school was really good. So it's hard to say, oh, it was traumatic, or I was abused, or cup of tea, or anything like that, because it wouldn't be true. But obviously, there's things which are happening there in terms of your makeup as an individual that you're not aware of. In that time, my parents divorced. And again, it's dead easy people to pinpoint, or child of divorce, this is where it all started, this is where it must all start from. But actually, credit to my parents. They dealt with us, me and my brother, with that really well. If I remember one instant, my dad sat me and my brother down on the stairs and said, "Look, me and your mum we've been arguing, and you guys don't like that. It upsets you." And no, we don't like that. So what we go do is, your mum's just going to go and move around the corner, 5 minutes away, and all it really means is you'll get more Christmas presents because there'll be 2 people buying now. And that's how they sold it to us, and it was fine. I'm sure it wasn't fine for them, and it was really messy for them. But to an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old at that point, that certainly wasn't in our faces. We didn't feel like we were being used as a pawn or anything like that on a chessboard. And then shortly after that, this is going to sound so middle class and upper class, my dad married the au pair. An au pair is a posh nanny, and she was a Turkish woman. And again, I'm not going to say anything derogatory, because people they don't have the right to defend themselves in this, between me and you. And things were fine because I was off at boarding school. I'd come home once every 3 months, so there was no issue. And with my stepmom, and my mum had remarried at that point as well, and it was okay. I don't remember much what you'd classify as trauma at this point. Things start changing and get more difficult when I leave boarding school and I go to a grammar school in Manchester for the GCSE years, the last 2 years of school. And things get really bad when, at the end of school, so I think my stepmom saw it as some like, oh, he's going to be here all the time now. Things got really bad, to a point where she attacked me with, I think it was a high heel shoe. I seem to remember it was either her Hoover extension or a high heel shoe, but she attacked me. And actually, let's rewind a little bit. It got really bad for a period where, during my GCSEs, for about 2 weeks, I had to camp in the garden of the family home, and my dad would bring me food once a day. I had a radio, and yeah, people don't remember that in my family. But yeah, I had to live in a tent in the garden for, it was at least a couple of weeks. Yeah, so this is where things going on. I'm just going to pause it there a bit. So again, we're not looking for excuses of why me and Guy are split up. This is about me, maybe difficulties in relationships, difficulties with friendships, difficult with relationships at work. Maybe things are starting to explain themselves a bit more now. And eventually I come back into the house, and then it all blows up in the summer where I'm attacked physically by my stepmom, my Turkish stepmom. At that point, I fell into a charity called Shelter. And there's a few little details which are not relevant, but that never had to happen. There was money available where they could have gone and rented me a flat. I would have been just turning 16 at this point, by the way. I just turned 16 at this point. And they could have gone and got me a flat locally. There were many things which could have prevented this from happening. My understanding is my stepmom had threatened my dad. If he doesn't go, I'm going to take, and at this point they had had a baby. I'm going to take your daughter, my sister, back to Istanbul with me. So my dad was put in it's Hobson's choice, this catch-22 of, do I either kick Stephen out or do I lose my young daughter and my wife and they go back to Istanbul. But that said, there were things which could have stopped the next stage happening. And obviously quite a lot of this is now trauma, camping in the garden while doing your GCSEs. And this is where I fall in with shelter. Now, shelter couldn't find me accommodation, but they could put you in different houses, like 2 or 3 each week, where you'd go and stay in a family spare room or something like that. And I did that for basically the whole of that summer. Just crazy in hindsight, absolutely fucking crazy. I could go into a lot more detail, and maybe one day I will, about stories of this, of that summer. And then eventually Stockport Council get wind. Now, because of my age, at 16, you're not legally a child and you're not legally an adult. You're in this legal loophole. And they didn't know where to put me, so they put me in a bail hostel. Now, just to explain, I know most of you will know what a bail hostel is. A bail hostel is one of two things. It's either where adults are awaiting trial for court, or they have been released early from prison, but there's still set parameters on their release, and they have to go and live in a bail hostel for the remaining of their sentence. And suddenly I was a 16-year-old boy from boarding school, one of the poshest boarding schools in the country, and suddenly I'm living in a bail hostel in Stockport with fully grown men, 40-year-old men, 30-year-old men, 25-year-old men. And it was horrific. Well, I'll tell you a few things which happened. But I was there for about a year and a half, until my stepdad kindly put the money forward to get me a flat in Hazel Grove in Stockport, which was my first flat ever. So I'll give you one example. You couldn't own anything. Because I was 16, I was a prime target. I wasn't streetwise. I didn't know anything. I had never even smoked a cigarette at that point. And it does make you feel blessed in a way that I've had the life I've had to this point. And yeah, I'm going through a bad period now, but I've been blessed, especially the last nearly 10 years with Gaia. Incredibly blessed with the things I've seen, the places I've travelled with her. Because at that crossroads, and that's a crossroads at 16 in a bail hostel surrounded by murderers, rapists, gangsters, drug dealers, burglars. You're going to go one of two ways, and you're either going to go that way and fall into petty crime and then more serious crime, or you're going to escape that. And yeah, so I'll tell you a few examples and then how I get out of it with that, apart from the help of my stepdad. So my first ever girlfriend was called Nicola Kelly. I can name her because she's no longer with us. That's another story. She passed away of cancer, actually, when she was 30. It was a really sad story. And I was with Nicola Kelly, and do you remember Wallace and Gromit? Remember Wallace and Gromit? And you remember Shaun the Sheep? You remember Shaun the Sheep? And there was a Shaun the Sheep rucksack. And Nicola Kelly was obsessed with Shaun the Sheep. And all she wanted was a Shaun the Sheep bag. And for Valentine's, our first Valentine's, my first Valentine's with a girl. I got her a Sean Mashiq bag, and I got beaten up for it, and it was taken off me, and it was sold for drugs. They probably didn't get very good drugs for a Sean Mashiq bag, or a lot of drugs, or maybe really good drugs but not a lot, or a lot of really shit drugs. But it would have been a good deal for a Sean Mashiq bag. I had all my Oasis CDs, all the singles, and I got beaten up for them. This was a daily occurrence where you would get beaten up, you would get attacked, physically heavily assaulted 5-6 times a week. And how do you get out of that? Firstly, none of my friends knew. Nicola Kelly, my first girlfriend, didn't know where I was living. I lied to her for the whole year and a half we were together. I told her I lived at home, but my parents were really difficult and don't like me bringing people back. I lied because I was ashamed of my conditions. I was ashamed of the position I'd found myself in, despite it being not my fault and one of circumstance. So this is what I do. I got a job, £2 an hour at a chippy, a fish and chip shop in Hazel Grove in Stockport. I then sign on for job seekers allowance illegally because I had a job. I had a job 3 nights a week in a chippy. I was signing on, which I believe was about £32 every 2 weeks, something like that. And I knew I needed a future. So I enrolled in catering college. Da-da-da. And this is how it all begins. So during all this chaos, to make sure I wasn't in that environment, I took myself out of the environment. I worked. I was at college. And I made sure I had money coming in. But it took a year and a half not to be in that position. At the time, it was quite a weird experience, quite similar to how I feel now, where it was lonely. Like on days where I wasn't doing anything, or I wasn't at work, or I wasn't at college, or I wasn't seeing Nicola, I would just walk. I would just walk the streets because I couldn't be in that building, in the hostel, in the Bale hostel. I remember I had a social worker called Steve. It's my understanding, I need to be careful of this. He ends up quitting because of the situation I'd found myself in, because he believed they should have been doing more, and he wasn't in a position to do more. But yeah, that was horrific. And I've never really understood the extent that can have. You know, we go back to when I was 8, sent away to boarding school. As an 8-year-old being sent away by the ones who are meant to treasure you the most and love you the most. And then fast forward that happening again when you're put into a hostile environment, quite a dangerous environment, where you could have ended up getting into crime and other ways. And so when also people talk to me recently, and this is a recent one, oh, it'll get better. All I've done is survive. I was surviving at 8. I was surviving at 8. I'd cry every night with a picture of my mum and my dad under the pillow. That was the first term at boarding school. I remember that quite vividly. And there was a phone in the hostel where you could phone somebody and they could pick up and you could hear them, but they couldn't hear you until you put the money in the slot. And all I wanted to do was hear people's voices my family's voices. So I'd phone them and they'd think it was a prank call or there's something wrong with the call. They wouldn't know it's me. But for at least 5 to 7 seconds, I would hear, hello? Hello? Who is this? And that was enough. So people are leaving me, Gaia. I'm used to it. Fine, whatever. I take responsibility for it. I was a dickhead for 3.5 years and I took you for granted. I was the luckiest man in the world. I didn't know it. It was too late. It's too late. But when you've had those experiences, and here's another thing, when you've had those experiences, you know you can get through anything because it's in your DNA. But also, someone said, well, how can you have a relationship with these people now? It's dead easy. Because hate's a really tiring emotion. Really exhausting to be filled with hate. You never forget. You never forget. But you do forgive. I don't know what it must have been like for my dad at that time to be put in a position where it's me or my sister. I don't know. I don't know what it must have been like for my mum when I was 8 years old, being pressured by my dad to send her son away to boarding school. I don't know what that must have been like. I don't know how I would react. But also, I've always, and even to this day, however bad things get, and I'd say this to all of you, however bad things get, and it's not taking away what you're going through or what I'm going through or what I've been through, there will always be somebody in your vicinity or within 100 meters of you who's going through much, much, much worse. And I've always taken comfort from that in terms of having things into perspective. And yeah, there you go. Have a good day, guys. This doesn't work. You see, that was a great one. Have a great day, guys. And it should have just gone blank. We can talk about that again, maybe in some more detail, maybe another day. But I think it was important, you've been listening to this shit for so long now. I think maybe it was time you had a bit more context into Gaia picking up the mess. And there was another long-term relationship as well in my early 20s, mid-20s. What Gaia and what that person went through, you never know. Maybe it was because of boarding school and the hostel. Or maybe it was because I was just a dickhead. Who knows?